It, the Long Arm Quilting Show, is brought to you by Handi Quilter, manufacturer of easy-to-use long arm quilting machines, designed by a quilter for quilters. Paintbrush Studios, inspirational fabrics. Hobbs Bonded Fibers, when your project demands the finest. Fresh from the heart of Texas, Hobbs battings are made to last. Whether you're creating a family heirloom or an award-winning show quilt, Hobbs has a batting that will work for you. Choose Heirloom 80/20 for the traditional look of 100% cotton with increased strength, durability, and dimension. Looking for something new? Give Hobbs Tuscany Silk a try. Tuscany Silk is made from wild Tussa silk. It's machine washable, quilts with ease, and will create a lightweight quilt with snugly good drapeability. Hobbs Bonded Fibers, a genuine Go Texan company when your project demands the finest. Welcome to yet another episode of Quilt at the Long Arm Quilting Show. I'm your host, Jodie Davis, and my guest today is Bethanne Nemesh, known for her nemeshing, which is a quilting technique. And you're going to talk about that in this episode later on, but you're going to start with something called mid-custom quilting?
Yes, I like to do a style of quilting that I call mid-custom quilting, and it's because I quilt for business, and my customers, like a lot of people, want to make quilts for their grandchildren and their kids going off to college. They're friendly quilts, they're loved quilts. But sometimes they don't want edge-to-edge quilting, which is the easiest, simplest thing that we long armers tend to reach for. They want something a little nicer and that feels a little special, but they really whinge once I start telling them that their quilts are going to cost $700 to quilt. Yes. So I want them to feel like their quilts are being treated really special with unique motifs that, and I don't use a computer, so everything's very unique to their quilt, but that I'm getting paid a reasonable fee, and they're feeling like they're getting a great value for their quilts. And so I've come up with a way of doing freehanding that's built on how we long arm quilters learn to feather, and instead of using feathers, insert different items, whether it's a bird, it's flowers, it's leaves, organic shapes, baby rattles, wedding bells, things that relate to what's going on in the quilt or the purpose of the quilt. And that makes my clients feel like their quilts are being treated very specially, and yet when they write that check, they're not fainting. So
that's right.
That's a big deal.
We still have the custom. It's still special. It's unique.
It's unique. But from a quilter's point of view, I can use high contrast thread because I'm not doing any backtracking. I'm not doing any stitch in the ditch particularly, except for maybe around the outside of a block, so you don't have to worry about wiggling in and out of the ditches. And in general, I'm not worrying about the piecing particularly, so I don't have any of the fussy hit the point. And also, let's face it, most piecers, especially if you're a piece for, or if you're quilting for others, not every quilt is maybe as amazingly pieced as what you're personally capable of. You're getting a really broad range of talent, and ability that comes to me. And so by able to ignore the piecing, I don't have to worry about those bulky seams, or maybe they didn't press it the way it should be pressed. And so that's really helpful too. And as a business person, I'm able to just be a lot less stressed about trying to make those quilts look as if they were done perfectly, because it doesn't matter if they were done for love.
That's exactly right. And keeping the stress down is a good thing.
It's an extremely good thing, yes. When I do my show quilting, I'm 500 hours of high stress because every detail has to be exquisitely perfect. And when I work for clients, I don't want to have to worry about that. So I focus on a market that is, a mid-custom market for my clients, but it's very broadly appealing to everyday quilters. Because the stress of formal feathers and extensive marking is, for a lot of people, just not that much fun. But they don't really want to meander all their quilt tops either. They want them to feel special. And so this is a way that each quilt can feel unique and special.
Mid-custom quilting.
Mid-custom quilting, that's right.
And you have a book that this is the not done copy.
This is as done as it's going to get. All that's left is to give it to the printer.
Okay.
Yes, so this is my new book. It's available on my website, and when I teach at teaching venues, I'll have copies of it with me. And it's a lot of drawings and a lot of samples.
Wow.
So is your quilt Christmas? Do you want pine cones? Do you want pine needles? Is it from the beach? Do you want seashells, wedding bells?
Baby rattles.
And the number one thing that people say to me is, I can't draw, I can't do that. That's crazy. Oh, Bethanne, you're an art major. Of course you can draw. But that's, it's really not true. The fact is that every single design that I do is based on the same move and the same pattern. And you can break down pretty any shape that you see into just a simple outline, and it works just fine. But also, it's mid-custom. It's not being judged, and you know, if that pine cone looks different from that pine cone, no one's going to come after you about it.
That's right. That's
so
right.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So what I'd like to do is show you how the progression goes from, if you know how to feather, then you can easily make any of these shapes.
Great.
Okay. So now I'm going to just do 2 of the main shapes that I work with. All long armors tend to know 2 ways of feather, or they do both. They either do heirloom feathering, which typically means going over the top of a feather and then making the second feather, or they do what they call long arm feathers, where they're essentially echoing the previous feather on a spine. So I'm going to just stitch each of those really quick and then show how those sort of progress into what I do.
Okay.
Okay. Almost all long armors have learned to do a formal feather. So when they do that, they're typically making a hook, they're back tacking, and they're making a second feather. So most long armors are familiar with that. And if they don't do that one, then they typically are doing what they call a long arm feather. So making a single shape, and they've learned to echo it. And you go back and forth, echoing the previous feather. So most people who've been sewing on a long arm for any length of time have learned to do some version of that.
Right.
Both of which can be pretty stressful, because as you can see, if you miss the back tack, it's kind of obvious.
Yeah.
And not all quilts need that, and you know, it's more fun to have some variety. So whenever I'm looking at a new quilt to quilt for someone, I look at the fabric, ask them how they intend to use it, is it for a special occasion, and from there we kind of talk about what they want their fabric or their quilt to look like.
And just looking at the book, if it's a Christmas quilt or whatever the theme is, that already sets the tone.
Right. So if it's a Christmas quilt, then some things like Christmas balls, berries, holly, pine trees, Christmas
it could go
lights.
winter, or it could go Christmas tree. Or
Could go Christmas tree. It makes sense. In today's day and age, floral patterns are in just about every quilt, so it's really easy to do leaves.
Oh, right, right.
And those are very simple, and you can add flowers. My main thing is that I ignore the piecing. Most quilts that come to me are a fairly standard formula. You have blocks, you have sashing, you have borders. You know, there's other types of quilts, but 90% of them fall into that category. So I use the concept of let's ignore the piecing and place what essentially is a wreath on top of the block.
Oh.
It doesn't have to be a wreath. It can be squared off. But the idea is, if you were to use a stencil, then you should use one of these things, because when you stencil, you have to find the stencil, you have to get the right size stencil, you have to pounce the stencil, you have to see the pouncing in order to make the...
So already you've done a whole lot of work.
You've already done all that
time.
work. Correct. And mostly the chalk bounces off by the time you get to it. And it just adds all the steps and all the stress to it. So instead, just ignore it all. And I'm going to do a little sample here for you, as if we have a block. So I'm just going to stitch out a square. We're going to pretend that that's our block.
Okay.
And I'm going to freehand a circle in the middle of it. Although oftentimes at home I would use a ruler template
draw
a
circle?
A really nice quilted circle. Just because when you have that quilted spine for a circle, it does help your wreaths look really round. But you can freehand it too, it doesn't matter.
Okay.
All right, so I'm just going to move over here and make a little square. Okay, so there we've got our fake block.
Uh-huh. Our fake block.
Yeah, our fake block.
Our practice block.
There you go. And, that might be an Ohio Star or whatever.
It can be anything.
It can be
what you're
anything.
saying.
So, whatever the piecing is, I'm going to find the center, and I might use a ruler template to either draw a circle or just quilt a circle using the center. So I'm just going to eyeball.
You're so courageous.
Yes, it's only TV, right?
Right.
I'm just going to eyeball a circle, and we're all going to pretend that I'm perfect. So
We'll do that for you.
there you go. All right, so we're going to get that out of the way. And not perfect, but fine for what we're
Well, it'll
going to
be
do.
interesting to see how it turns out since
There you
it's not
go.
perfect.
There we go. So I thought maybe we could do a shamrock.
Okay.
Because it's probably something that most people would not think to themselves, a leaf is a shamrock. But believe it or not, people ask me for shamrocks all the time.
Oh, really?
A lot of double Irish chain quilts, they say, oh, I really want that to
yes,
seem
yes, yes,
Irish,
yes,
you know.
yes.
So I thought we would do a shamrock for fun. I'll do a swirl, which is straight from doing, you know, the hook of a back tack.
Oh, yeah.
And then I'm going to do the shamrock. And then when we're done with this, maybe we can just do one all by itself real slow so we can see how it goes.
Okay.
I'm not sure how successful I'll be talking and quilting at the same time, so
Okay.
we'll give it a shot. All right, so I'm going to start with a swirl. And then I'm going to do a shamrock.
I love it.
So kind of we've filled up our center part here.
Yes.
So the thing that makes this so much like feathering is that I'm using the concept that I'm echoing the back of the thing I did previously. And it's all connected on a chain.
Right.
So when I do this type of quilting, I'm just connecting everything together on a chain.
So it's like the circle is your spine.
Exactly, the circle is my spine, although you can do them spineless as well. And especially if you have maybe an asymmetrical item, you want a feature or flower on one side, you don't have the luxury of going back through it, so you
Okay,
kind of have to do both sides at the same time. So we'll finish this off, and I'm just going to fill the space.
Wow.
So I'm going up the back of the feather, and I'm just echoing my little stem.
It's so simple, but it
So
doesn't have
easy.
it. With the concept in mind, it's simple.
Yes. And it doesn't matter if I want to make this a round wreath or a square wreath.
Right, because you can fill in.
Well, I just
You
tell
make things bigger.
I just tell myself to stretch myself out to the edges
Yep.
or not, depending on what you want to do. When I do these types of quilts, I'm never spending more than about 3 minutes on a block, which is way less than you'll spend on,
3 minutes a block, okay.
yeah,
And you've done no prep work?
No.
You haven't had to
Nope.
find a design or?
no prep work whatsoever. The only thing I've done is find the center of my block. And a lot of piecing has the center built in. You don't even have to find it.
Oh, that's right.
So that's a lot easier. So let me just move over here and show you most of what I've done is based on a long arm feather that I'm simply adding a little stem to, and you're echoing your stem. So it's very, very simple. So I'm just making a little stem and pretend you've done a long arm feather around it. So a little stem and a long arm feather around it, except that we're going to not do a long arm feather, we're just going to make some other shape. So a little stem, and then maybe I'm doing a leaf around it. A little stem and a fancier leaf around it. And a little stem and about an oak leaf.
So it's the same idea. You have your little stems, your base.
That's
and
right.
You're working from that and doing different things. But it's kind of like going home again, so you can
Right,
think,
right.
I'm going back home. Now I'm going to go off and do something different.
Correct. So when I did these shamrocks, instead of going all the way back, I just went part of the way.
Yeah.
And then, but it's make the little stem, surround it with something. Make the little stem, surround it with something. And that something can be anything that comes to mind from the project that you're working on. And then I tie it all together with these little swirls.
Yeah.
And then periodically, a ribbon might look really nice. You know, of a baby quilt or quilts of valor. You want just a bunch of ribbons overlapping. And so instead of a swirl, I make a simple little ribbon. So I'm doing a little little tooth.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's so easy.
Very easy.
Okay, so what are you going to do in the next segment to show us more of mid-custom quilting?
Well, we're going to take the mid-custom quilting and then I'm going to progress on upwards towards the full custom quilting that I do for some of my higher end work and the actual nemeshing. a backfill that I do on a lot of my clients' applique work.
Yep.
But show how to simplify that as well, so that it's still approachable, the people who want to do really high end, and approachable to the average Joe.
Yep, always push ourselves a little bit more.
That's right, that's right.
Great, well thank you. I'm excited to see the next
Thank
part.
you, thank you.
Yay, we'll be back with more the Long Arm Quilting Show with Miss Nemish.
Thank you.
We are the Handi Quilter Studio educators, and we want you to know why we love our Handi Quilter quilting machines.
Handi Quilter quilting machines are innovative. Check out the color touch screens, 2 kinds of stitch regulation, and computer-guided quilting.
Handi Quilter quilting machines are intuitive and easy to use, and they come in a size that fits your quilting style.
Handi Quilter offers training, service, and ongoing education. We care about your quilting experience.
Handi Quilter quilting machines are designed by a quilter for quilters. We'll be at a quilt shop near you or a show. Come give one a test drive. To learn more, call or click for a free demo DVD or
Follow the truck to Handi Quilter.
We're back with more quilting with Bethanne Nemesh, and it's mid-custom quilting, which is such a great concept. In our first segment, Bethanne showed us how to do some quilting, and the example really is right behind us on this quilt here.
Right.
And you did some real freehand stuff, but you took the scariness out of it. It's
Right.
custom for each quilt, really, but you're not doing any marking, you're not doing any backtracking.
Right.
Good stuff.
Right. And I've taken that a step farther, and I've just developed a backfill that I use on a lot of my client quilts, and also on my show quilts. And it's become kind of popular. And I started in the long arm world, going on these online forums, and I used it so much that people started calling it after me, and so they're calling it nemeshing, which I find really hard to take, but
Yeah, but your name is perfect.
It is what it is.
Nemeshing, it's a great word.
it is what it is. When I started teaching, I really was cringing, but the folks who own the show were like, no, you got to use it.
It's a trademark.
It's a trademark, right. So this is an example of nemeshing. And it's a little bit beyond what we talked about in the first segment, in the sense that it's closer to formal quilting. But again, I'm not a huge fan of backtacking. I'm not a huge fan of stress. So I'm trying to find a way that I can accomplish the look of something really elaborate without raising my blood pressure too terribly much.
Yeah.
And when it comes to working with my clients, I want to be able to do it smoothly and effectively for them as
You've
well.
got a budget.
Because I have a budget, right. So this is an example of what people like to call as nemeshing. I often will backfill it with the little bubbles or the little pebbling. And these feather sprays look very hard and they're very lacy, and people are very confused by them. But in fact, I'm not really backtacking, and I'm not really stressing out over it. And they're super organic. There's no marking, and so that makes it really easy. The part, though, that sends this look into a little bit of a higher budget for my clients is the fact that I'm backfilling it very tightly. But a little bit later, I'd like to show you a sample of doing the same feathers with a little bit less backfill. And that helps make it a little bit more approachable when budget's an issue. But when you're quilting for yourself, sky's the limit. With nemeshing, the feather sprays are made up of just 4 main components, and I'll be happy to stitch them out for you as well.
That'd be great, yes.
But essentially, I do what I call a puff head feather. So it's a feather with this little puffy head.
Yep.
I do a swirl feather, very easy to do for most people. I do a backtack feather, but typically I'm only backtacking about 1/4 of an inch without not really trying to hit the whole feather as a backtack. And then I'll do a combination feather where I'm doing half a swirl and half as a regular feather, but it's a non-backtack feather combination, and it's the backfill then that turns it into this lacy appearance. But this one has been framed out with this little beadboard, and that's a really effective way to handle big sections of quilting, where you might say to yourself, I really don't want to spend the next 3 years pebbling my quilt. So you can section off areas to do this really high density type of quilting, and then do something else in other areas.
Well, and this further frames it. If the pebbling went right to the edge, it would be...
Yeah, it creates a really nice contrast.
Yeah.
And straight lines always look fantastic with
Yes.
curvy lines. So this is a really good way to, even you can imagine this blown up onto a big quilt with lots of blocks. And it looks really cool.
Gorgeous.
Yes.
Ooh.
So this, you can see the similarities between these
Right.
two, where I'm still doing the puff head feathers, I'm still doing the swirls, I'm still doing the combination swirl feather pieces, and the little feather sprays look the same. They're bigger in scale, and instead of doing this pebbling backfill, on this sample, I've done a stipple backfill on half and
Oh.
an echo backfill on the other half.
And you don't, because you don't have that concentrated, the pebbles, the other parts don't pop up as much.
They don't pop up as much, and it becomes more of that overall background quilting. So it's definitely a different look. You know, but let's face it, if you're going to spend an hour and a half doing this one block, you know, versus 10 minutes doing this block, it makes a big difference, especially if you're quilting for hire. If you're quilting for yourself, then you can do whatever you want.
Take as much time as you want. You can stay up all night and tomorrow night too.
That's right, and that often happens.
Yep.
And you can do it without the backfill. So for this sample, it's the same, except that I've stretched the feathers as far as I can stretch them until they touch each other. So now it's covering everything. So,
Oh, interesting.
Yes.
Yeah.
so it's kind of 3 ways of doing the same. But the feathers are all the same. I'm using just 4 little feathers, and I'm not paying any attention whatsoever to which direction they go, and they just sort of grow in whatever way makes them happy.
Oh, I need to fill in over here, so I'm going that way.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. So I would be happy to quilt a little piece for you.
Please.
All right.
That would be wonderful.
And we'll show this little sample here in a second after I'm done.
I'll hold on to it.
Okay. So as I said, I use 4 feather shapes. And let's get started. So the first feather shape that I do is a puff, what I call a puff head feather, for lack of a better word
It's
for
descriptive, though.
it. It's descriptive, right. So I'm just making a little circle, but before I connect it, I'm coming back.
Uh-huh.
So you make an almost circle, and then you come back.
So you're not going over another line that you have to worry about it being
That's
perfect.
right. And whenever I do this, I use this for the stems of my little feather sprays and as individual feathers. When I'm thinking about it as a stem, I try to come back close to being a back tack towards the end because I want to crisscross back and forth over the spray without starting and stopping. That's the key to doing fast things, is you don't want to start and stop.
Right.
So I always practice making these in lots of different directions. That one's a little awkward.
It's pretty to me. It's just not as puffy.
Right. So you can see here that I've come close to, so I have a couple of spots that touch that I can crisscross back and forth if I want to. So the other feather that I use is a non-back tack feather set. So I'm just going to zip up here and make one of those. So for that, I'm making a swirl or a puff head, either one, and coming out about 3/4 of the way around the circle, and then making the feather.
Wow.
So I'm going to make another one using that puff head, and coming about 3/4 of the way.
So you're overlapping just a teeny bit.
Really, almost not at all.
Almost
So
not at all,
you're coming out of the back of the circle, and then making a standard classic classic feather.
Something I've noticed, Bethanne, is you do have
have
the
my
ruler
hand-
base on.
Yes, I do quilt with the ruler base on. Partly it's laziness that I don't change between my quilts.
Okay.
But the other part is that it creates drag and stability. When you're doing feathers, sometimes a lot of long armers feel out of control. They feel like they're outracing their machine, or different machines have different feelings of drag to them on their tables. Some might be really smooth, some are harder, and so by putting the friction here, it kind of gives you some control to push against, so that you don't like swing past your marks.
Right.
And so yes, I do that. I never really noticed it though until people pointed it out to me.
Yeah,
It's
because it was a
just a
natural
habit.
thing to
It's a
do.
habit.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm going to do then a little feather set where I'm just going to do like a small little piece of back tack. So again, I don't really like the stress of back tacking, so I'll just do a small back tack. And so I might have done the starter feather, a little back tack. So now it looks like 3 feathers that are kind of hard together, but really I've only back tacked about 2 stitches there. But it looks like it looks harder than it is.
Yep.
So we've done the puff head, and we've done the combination piece, and we've done a little micro back tack there. And the last thing is just a standard swirl. So I'm just doing a swirl and coming back to wherever I started from. And it's those things in combination that creates the look that people call nemeshing. And when you add the backfill to it,
It makes everything pop.
It makes everything pop. So let me do a little spray with everything.
Okay.
And we'll do the backfill. Now, I would not recommend particularly doing backfill in a high contrast thread like this.
Right.
It's a lot more stressful.
Yes.
And
we've already gotten that she doesn't like stress.
No. Who likes stress? And also, I use this on applique, and I'm not the one making these applique quilts.
Yes.
And so it's not my job to be waving my flag. It's
Right.
the appliqueur's job to be looking like a superstar. So I'm using matching thread, and this is a textural quilting technique so that I'm matching the background thread so that their applique is fabulous, and then my quilting is supportive of their quilting.
Yep.
I save the showing off from my show quilts, and otherwise I had to look at what makes my client look the best when I'm quilting for other people. So I'm just going to make a little puff head stem and do, the trick with nemeshing is that you don't really have to have any rules. These feathers don't connect. You're going to leave gaps. You're going to make them different sizes, and they just sort of grow and they flow. And because I typically will do this with applique, we're going to do a little fake applique flower here.
Oh, just so you have something to work with.
Right.
Okay.
I mean, I can do it just on the blank the blank fabric as well. But, you know, it looks really nice with applique. So we're just going to make a little fake applique flower here. All right.
Aw,
So he's a little lollipop flower.
he's cute.
There we go, like a little cherry.
It does look like a cherry.
So I will anchor my nemeshing off of some point on the applique where it can grow off of it. It can flow. You might want to accentuate if there's a bend in the applique or some sort of natural movement. But the whole goal here is that you're trying to fill the applique. You're trying to fill the backfill. So I will have some pieces come very close to the applique and then sort of grow off, because the idea is you want to fill up all the back of the fabric. So I might do a single puff head. And now I'm going to come close to the applique. There's a tiny little back tack. Now I might skip a bit and do a swirl. And now I might do a swirl with a feather and then go in a different direction. So we've just finished a little feather spray, not really following any rules here, and we'll just fill it with a little pebble backfill so you can kind of get the sense for where that laciness comes from.
Okay.
I like to switch it into a manual mode. Most machines can switch between manual or stitch regulation, but I find that the hesitation of a stitch regulator for me is harder for me to make circles smoothly. So I will use a manual mode. So I'm going to fill some of this area with this bright gold thread, and we'll see how it looks.
I'm sure it'll look great.
Yeah, and the nice thing about is that you can just kind of skip down between the threads. You know, you don't have to start and stop particularly. So I like to fill any areas that aren't feathers. So if they've got a little, if they're a swirl, I'll fill into those little swirls or into the corners of the little puff heads, and that really makes them pop out, especially if you use a thicker batting. I like to use Hobbs 80/20, and a lot of times with quilts I'll actually double the Hobbs 80/20, so I get a really nice puffy density.
Okay.
Even with my client quilts, and sometimes using double batting just underneath of their applique and using single batting elsewhere.
So you get the extra puff.
Extra puff, right. You really want it to look nice. All right, so here we go. So I'm just filling in this little zone right here.
Oh, it makes a difference.
It makes a huge difference.
And it's pretty quick, though, if you're doing miles of them.
Yes, and I like to use different sized pebbles. A lot of people love like consistent looking ones, but I find different sized ones to be more charming.
Yep, they're all different.
Yeah, and also I love the way that they relate to the puff head feathers. I feel like the texture and the puff head feathers work together.
It's kind of an echo kind of thing. a repeat.
Right.
Oh, that just is so different.
It really changes the appearance.
Cool. Great.
Yeah. So
Well,
there we go.
That really shows what
It does. It
mid-custom
does.
quilting is, and that it's kind of an elastic thing depending on how
It's
much
extremely
you want to do.
elastic. I would say that if you're doing a backfill like this, you probably ought to consider it a little bit more expensive than
Yeah.
mid-custom quilting. But if you're doing this just with all the feathers touching or with some stipple, it wouldn't be. And I use this on borders as well. And I brought a sample, a little border sample, where you can
That's right,
see
the back.
the progression.
The back is the front.
Yes, the back is the front.
Oh, that really illustrates it. So we start here.
So this is a really simple pattern that basically every long armer is going to learn, which is your C-curve quilt. And then turn those little C-curves into little puff heads. And then add a feather.
Oh.
Or maybe you're going to add a couple of feathers. But it's continuous. And so you're doing both sides at the same time when I do this. And then you can see here how lovely it looks, except that I've never marked. I've never worried about which, where the curve is. If you were doing a classic, say, curling Amish feather, you would maybe want to use circles and you want to mark it and you want to make sure it turns the corners just right. But with this, it doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
No.
Oh, that's great.
No. And, it's a fun thing to do. And it's because it's organic and there's no rules. It looks great every time.
Yeah, I can see that. And it's fun.
It is fun. It is fun.
Well, I can't wait to see your show quilt. There's one on the back wall there that is just exquisite. But
Thank you.
first, we're going to go over and I'm going to invite Vicki into the studio and see what she has because she's been watching and she's going to come up with her own little thing.
Great.
But we'll have you back for the third segment. This is so much fun. I can't wait to see you.
Thank you.
We'll be back with more Quilt It, the Long Arm Quilting Show. Stay with us. Vicki, did you notice what Bethanne said about nemeshing the term, that she's kind of embarrassed about it, that she didn't invent it, it was her students and people online that know her that kind of gave her that brand? I mean, that's a huge compliment to be that, have something that's that your thing. That's like
right.
a trademark.
That's right. And the other thing that I really noticed that she said is that there's no law, or not no law, there's no rules.
Yes.
That she just quilts and she creates, and it's her nemeshing.
Yeah.
So, we throw out the quilt, please.
Get rid of the helmet. Ugh.
Okay.
It's about time anyway.
All right, yeah.
I hope the helmet's smashed. We're tired of them.
So what I want to show you is we have 3 quilts here. They're quilted entirely different.
Oh, they're the same
but they're
quilt?
pieced exactly the same, other than maybe this border here is different. Okay?
3 different people?
3 different people. These quilts were made from Machine Quilters Unlimited, and it was at the MQS show for a quilt auction for Quilts of Valor. And so Handi Quilter bought these 3 quilts from 3 different quilters. So this is from Rhonda Beyer, Carol Selipek, and Kimmy Bruner.
Okay.
Okay, so you're seeing their style like nemeshing, but it's their style maybe. Kimmy does a lot with templates, and so I can see that she's used templates to get that perfection. And the other thing is she has changed the thread color here so that she's getting a little bit of change. You're seeing a texture change in the color on the white.
Yeah.
Where if we move this one aside, she's used white thread. This is feathers, straight line rulers, but a lot of feathers and some fun motifs there. Her style maybe.
Yeah.
And then this with Rhonda Beyer, a lot of feathers, curved cross hatching.
Yep. And she did some quilting in here.
That's right.
And Kimmy had done
And yet she left it unquilted here. This one is, all of the color blocks are unquilted, where Kim, she took hers and she quilted everything, each block.
Yep. But because they have color and everything, she didn't go to the extent that she did on the others.
Yeah. And see, this has blue thread, a really lightweight blue thread here, so that gives it a little bit of a different look. But it's their look, their feel. And so I think the thing that I want to really help our viewers feel is that they can take their feel of their quilting, and it's not wrong.
Right.
It's how they interpret something, like how Bethanne interpreted feathers and the way she does feathers. Somebody will do something entirely different in another quilt. But it's okay. There are no quilt police.
That's right. Do your own thing.
That's right, and feel good about it.
Yay. You're good at that too. Well, let's go back. In our next segment, we're going to get more of Bethanne, and she's going to show us the process she does to come up with her ideas for her award-winning quilts.
Amazing quilts. I just
quilting
want
on
to take
them.
my camera and snap little pictures
Yeah,
together.
because of the detail. It's amazing.
Yeah.
So
Let's go.
We're in for a treat.
Yay.
Paintbrush Studios brings the high quality and experience of a 40-year-old fabric company and a friendly Midwestern attitude to your local quilt shop with our exclusive fabric lines. From the staple group of blenders to the exciting new collections introduced each season, Paintbrush Studios fabrics are created with the quilt maker in mind. Visit the Paintbrush Studios website to download the free pattern for Crystal Rainbow and create your own treasure.
Welcome back to Quilt at the Long Arm Quilting Show. We're back with Bethanne Nemesh, and she has shown us her nemeshing, which is really cool. But now you're really in for a treat. If you think the show's been good so far, Bethanne is quite an award-winning show quilter.
Yes.
And she's going to show us, with her scrapbooks and things, how she gets ideas and works through her ideas for her quilts. I'm so excited about this, because it's, to those of us who don't do it, it's such an unknown. It's magic.
It is. It does seem like it. But inspiration doesn't come from a bubble. It doesn't land on your head.
Oh, lightning doesn't strike and all of a sudden this beautiful quilt is
It
done.
doesn't. It doesn't. And most show quilts take more than a year, but that doesn't mean you're stitching on them for a year. The ideas just have to sort of build and percolate. And I'm going to share my way of capturing that inspiration and sort of the process that goes into one of my show quilts. And then I've brought the very early preliminary sketches of my newest quilt, which is still a pile of raw fabric. It's only exists in a sketchbook, but hopefully by next year there'll be another one
And we'll see it in a show. We'll get to go to a show
I
and
hope
see it
so.
with all its
I
ribbons
hope
on it.
so. Yes. So behind me here is one of my better-known show quilts. It's called the Shell Collector, and it's been all over the country traveling, and I've been very fortunate that it's placed many times, which has been great. It started off life in a sketchbook, and I brought that with me. So when I'm going through my daily life, anything that like strikes your interest is the kind of thing that creates inspiration. And when you're a quilter, when you see things, you see patterns, textures, clothing, doorknobs, wallpaper.
Anything can do it.
Amazing things.
Even stupid things like a heater, a cast iron heat vent,
Right,
or anything.
right. But those things are gone in a flash, and they're
Yeah.
out of your mind, and you don't document them. But now we live in the age of cell phones, and so you're capable of snapping a picture anytime you feel like it. And I keep sketchbooks of that kind of stuff. So if it interests me, even briefly, I capture it. And I use either an actual sketchbook or a digital sketchbook where I'm, creating folders on my computer of things that colors that appeal to me. So, for example, my sketchbook, I collect pictures of it doesn't matter what the picture is. I liked the color.
It's the color. There's also texture in them too.
There is, but the reason that I have these pictures in is something about it made me like the color.
Okay.
And so I have numerous pages, but for our purposes, we're talking about the Shell Collector, and it was these colors that kind of spoke to me. And
So at this time, that's it. It's the color. You didn't have beach.
No,
you didn't have a theme
nothing,
or anything.
nothing
Okay.
like that. But over time, you end up with 50 pictures, and you say to yourself, "Oh, dang, look at that!
This one really still, I love it.
There's like 20 that are blue and yellow.
Oh,
I must like blue and yellow, or
I'm in my blue and yellow phase.
or something like that." But that's what happens. You'll find yourself, being attracted to certain colors. And so if it's a greeting card, if it's a photograph, whatever it is, you don't have to like the subject matter. But if it was the color that drew you, well, then make a folder of that kind of stuff, because that's where your quilts come from. And let's face it, when you're doing a show quilt, you're going to be looking at it for 500 hours. You might as well like it. That's right. So the next step for me is some raw sketches. And this little image here is rocks in water, and it really spoke to me. And so the color is not reflected particularly in my quilt, but the idea that when I do go to the beach, I'm always picking up those pocketfuls of shiny rocks. And so that kind of related to me a little bit.
Yeah.
And so I began to sketch up my design ideas. And this is kind of faint, but believe it or not, this is as detailed as my show quilts get before I actually start working on them.
Oh.
And this is, to me, this makes sense, but you'd be like, I don't know, is that a fish? I have no idea.
Wow.
But I knew I wanted to do this feathered star and a star.
Okay.
I live outside of Lancaster, Pennsylvania. The Amish influence is very high there. And the traditional setting juxtaposed to this super elaborate pictorial quilting is just, to me, it really speaks to me. So that's kind of where my design came from. And if you look at the quilt behind me, you'll see that not all of the little triangles that surround it are the same size. Some of them are broken up into several smaller pieces. And to me, that represents all these little stones that I pick up at the beach.
Okay.
And I have this photograph of my children that it just captures their childhood. My daughter and her free spirit dancing on the beach, and my son, you know, obsessively collecting seashells, ignoring the fact that he's about to get clobbered by a wave. It's one of those moments when you have kids that really just captures their spirit, and so I wanted to translate that into a quilt. And so the sea theme combined with the colors began to speak to me. And so that's where these quilts start, and I began the sketching. And whenever I do a quilt like this, I will establish some central elements, and in the case of the shell collector, you've got this large jellyfish in one corner and the octopus in the other corner.
Yep.
And they kind of balance each other out.
Right.
And then I start to ask myself, well, what makes sense? How can I put these in atmospheric perspective with each other so that, you know, this becomes a scene and it makes sense? So you do some research and you learn that, well, sea turtles eat jellyfish. So it makes sense then to have a jellyfish swarm and a sea turtle. And octopus collect conch shells and they eat the snails.
So you
and
learn
then
about all sorts of things.
That's right. You start learning about it. And so wherever an octopus lives, you'll find a trash pit of seashells. And, well, then how do you fill the sides of the scenery? Well, it doesn't make a lot of sense to have empty ocean, so maybe the reef comes up the sides of the quilt. And so you keep asking yourselves these questions, like how can I make these items fit together? And you begin filling in the pieces. And then when I get ready to actually start working, I'll maybe buy some fabrics, and you can see here that I've tested out a couple of different possibilities for some color layouts. What did I feel like looks good? This was before I had completely decided on the. I wanted that stone idea, but then
so squares made sense.
Squares made sense, but in the end, I went with the feathers.
Yep. And you did silk because of the watery feel?
No, I actually did silk
Shimmery?
just because it's so shimmery and so pretty.
Shimmery, okay.
Yes. And my first show quilt, which is called Yellow in the Arbor, is an orange and a blue quilt. And I did it in silk, and it looked gorgeous, and it won awards. And I'm like, all right, well, this is
Stick with what's working.
Stick with what works, right? Unfortunately, silk is not cotton, and you can't treat it the same. And there's not a lot of information on dealing with silk. And I did go through a process of drawing with these quilts where I'm frequently drawing them on tissue paper, and I have a small sample of tissue paper drawing here. This is a small scene from my show quilt called October Sky, which is a fall scene. And you can see here the little bird with the raccoon climbing the oak tree. So I have this, but I got to get it on the quilt.
Yeah. Oh, and we're talking silk here.
You're talking silk. So I use the blue washout pen to transfer it to the quilt, which is fine as long as you babysit the silk really carefully. But I did shell collector before I learned that lesson, and I blocked the quilt when it was completely finished in freezing cold water because I was worried about the pen. They always say never get that blue pen warm because it will set. So that was no problem. It looked great. Fantastic. Took pictures of it, applied to send it to show, was accepted. 2 days before it was going off, I put the last stitch in the binding, and I just wasn't happy with the binding. I did a beaded binding, and I felt like it warped the quilt just a little bit. And I wanted to just flatten it out, you know, for perfection. But I wasn't worried about the blue anymore. And so I just put it in straight cold water, tap water. But it was summer, and your pipes aren't as cold in the summer as in the winter. And it bled, and it was destroyed.
And here it is.
And here it is. This is the first time anybody's ever seen the ruined one. And it's really hard to look at.
Did you cry? Were you physically ill?
I was really sick to my stomach over it.
I would imagine.
But this, as light and as miserably pale as this is, it's the same.
That is the colors.
They're awful.
Where'd this orange come from? This corally, you know?
I know. It's awful.
Wow.
It's awful. And, you know, see, it bled through back here. And so as soon as it started to bleed, as soon as it started to bleed, you start going through all of the, well, what can I do? What can I do to stop it?
Right.
Well, if it was cotton,
yes,
you would put it in really hot water with color catchers and try to bleed out the dye so that it wouldn't stick. Well, that just broke the dye chemistry for all the colors. And so while at first it just started off with this rust one being an issue, bleeding this fuchsia color, once that hot water hit that silk, all of the dye chemistry began breaking to all of them. And it never stops. And so it just leaches out. Because silk is, the dye process is an acid-based dye because of the fibers of the silk. It's completely different. So none of the fixes for cotton quilts work with silk quilts. In fact, they work against it. And so there was a terrible, terrible lesson. And I ended up doing it from scratch, you know, a second time. And so, but the new quilt I actually like better. I did a higher end job. Like there were areas that maybe when I was quilting the first quilt that I just got tired of. So I kind of made it like a lazy choice. But when I did the second quilt, I was all in, you know, making the hard choice. And when it comes to show quilting at, you know, at a level where you really want to be winning the awards, you really can't make the lazy choice. You have to do the hard thing. You have to do the over-the-top thing.
And the competition is so...
Oh, it's fierce.
Yeah.
It's fierce. And there's so many extraordinarily talented quilters out there. And yes, you really have to take the extra mile. And so I think that while the original quilt, you know, it might have gone to show and it might have done okay, I don't think it would have done anywhere near as well as the makeup version has done. Because it's the details that I added after the fact, like the beaded interior on the quilt. And it's those details that are the things that judges are just mad for. This is a little class that I teach called The Devil is in the Details, and I teach people to do the things like the beaded piping and you know, all the special little extra over-the-top techniques. And it's a hands-on class, and there's nothing slow, or you know, nothing easy and slow about it. So it's definitely a process.
Well, it's like when you're talking in the beginning about what the quilts are for, and that's the amount of effort you put into them. And
That's
this
right.
is the all-out thing.
That's right.
This isn't something your kid's going to drag to the beach.
It's not. It's not. So you know that, you know, you want this for show. You had to go all out. You had to do the whole thing. So what happens in my creative journey, though, is that once I'm done with the quilt, you know, I'm still very attracted to a lot of the qualities of it. And I'm an artist, not just a quilt artist, but a regular, you know, painting artist. I have fine arts degrees. And so I actually do paintings as well. So I will take the drawings that I've done and make paintings based on the quilt. So they're like illustrations of the show quilt. So the show quilt has inspired the paintings, so you can see how they kind of relate. And so what I've been doing lately is working with a printer to come up with a way to successfully reproduce the paintings onto a card. And I'm hoping to have those cards available to my students when they see me at various shows, and also on my website as well.
So we can have a piece of your quilt.
You can have, and the art that kind of goes with it. Absolutely. So I brought my newest concept. Would you like to see it?
Our sneak peek.
Your sneak peek. That's right. That's right. So my show quilts to date have been Gilded in the Arbor, the Shell Collector, and October Sky, which was a fall quilt. And this one I'm calling Into the Westward Sun.
Oh, you're going different here.
Yes, and this one is going to be a Southwest quilt, and I realize the sketching is very light, but again, it's enough for me. It's meant to be a trigger from my memory rather than needing to be something specific. So you can see how I've laid out the colors that I'm planning to use. And there's going to be, you know, the dead cow skull with the tarantula and the eyeball and the snakes and the lots of cool,
the whole thing.
The whole shebang.
We're not in Pennsylvania anymore.
No, no. It's meant to be kind of an allegorical story of a person who was experiencing the West for the first time. One of my ancestors traveled in a Conestoga wagon from the East to the West, and I'm sure that was a shock to the system to experience that in the first time. And so there's going to be this wagon wheel in the corner. But you can see here how I will do a painting to help me understand how the colors are going to relate and how I'm going to, you know, how the piecing is going to look. And so this is the design that I've chosen, although this was a concept I was kicking around as well. They're both pretty nice. This one definitely has that Southwest feel. Yeah. But to me, this is going to be a cleaner finish, and I'm gonna go with this.
And sometimes you got to do the other one to
to
work it through. Like
That's
get
right.
it out of your system, even if you knew that it probably wasn't.
Because this was my original idea, and whenever you're doing something creative, you have to really be careful not to get locked into.
Yes.
That's not my original vision. You know, you have to be willing to be flexible. Yes. So that's kind of where this happened, and so these are the fabrics that I'm going to use, and we'll see. By the end of the year, hopefully this will exist for real.
Wow, amazing. So you've won how many awards? Your 3 show quilts?
In 3 show quilts in 3 years, I believe, 47 national awards. And one of them was installed at the New England Quilt Museum.
Really?
At a special silk exhibit that they did, and have been in numerous magazines and publications.
Wow.
It's been a real blessing, and it's fantastic.
Yeah. But you give classes so we can learn some of these
I
things,
do,
right?
right. The classes that I teach a business class on helping business quilters talk to their clients, create market share, how to advertise, and most importantly, how to learn to make a living wage.
Yeah.
And I teach the mid-custom quilting to people, both as a drawing class and as a hands-on class. And I teach this beading, well, it's not just beading, but lots of the little details that will help take quilts from, really good to, oh my gosh, good.
Yeah. Wow. A whole smattering of
Whole
things.
smattering of things, that's right.
Right. And your website, of course.
Yes, my website is my business name, which is White Arbor Quilting, so it's whitearborquilting.com.
Great.
And it's based on my garden and the white arbor that's in my front yard. That way people
that.
don't get lost when they visit.
Just stop at the White Arbor.
That's right, that's right. Turn the corner and don't worry about the house number. Just stop when you hit the garden.
That's right.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
We've learned a lot in so many things, the quilting, and then to get this vision, this picture, insight into how you work is just, it's such a treat. Thank you.
Thank you.
It was a
for
big
having me.
surprise to me. I didn't know you were going to do this, so this was a special treat.
Thank you.
And I can't wait to see your next quilt, this one,
Yes.
hanging with a big fat ribbon on it somewhere.
I would love that. It's never a guarantee. It's tough competition, and it's not the reason I do it, but it's a blessing.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching Quilt at the Long Arm Quilting Show. We'll see you next time for more great quilting.
Thank you.
Love this color, rhubarb.
Yeah.
We are the Handi Quilter Studio educators, and we want you to know why we love our Handi Quilter quilting machines.
Handi Quilter quilting machines are innovative. Check out the color touch screens, 2 kinds of stitch regulation, and computer-guided quilting.
Handi Quilter quilting machines are intuitive and easy to use, and they come in a size that fits your quilting style.
Handi Quilter offers training, service, and ongoing education. We care about your quilting experience.
Handi Quilter quilting machines are designed by a quilter for quilters. We'll be at a quilt shop near you or a show. Come give one a test drive. To learn more, call or click for a free demo DVD or
Follow the truck to Handi Quilter.
For information on how to sign up for this and future episodes, visit qnntv.com.